I've got a confession to make.
I need to get this off my chest. As a business owner, we all make mistakes.
I've got to confess.
Hey guys, it's Charlie here from Confessions of a Business Owner, and today I am back with my fellow co-host Kim Barrett. How are you doing, Kim?
Doing very well. Thank you, Sir Charlie. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, really well. It's been one of those weeks that I wish every week could be like. I find I've struck this awesome balance between the enjoyment of life, so doing things I enjoy, but then also the enjoying my business and feeling productive and like things are happening. So some weeks it's, it can be really one-sided where it's all work, no play. Some weeks it's no work, all play. But I find that personally, like I get this really good enjoyment when it's like I feel like I've looked after me and looked after the business at the same time. So it's a win. Feeling good. Feeling really good about it. What about yourself?
I love it, man. Well, you're probably more on the balance than me. I am more on the work side at the moment, which is it ties in exactly what we're going to be talking about today. But the last couple of weeks, I've been making my adjustments and working on a few things. So we're getting much more towards the balance than we were previously, which is good.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge is like the weeks where you have to, really get in the trenches of your business, they come up for everyone. It's like if a key person leaves, if a circumstance comes up that was unexpected, it's like I can find myself, even with such a leveraged business that I don't have to be at all the time, there's certainly moments come up where my brain is needed occasionally, and I like to be able to get in there and make sure things are done right. So I've got a feeling you're probably experiencing a little bit of that at the moment.
Just a little bit.
So today's topic, I'll let you reveal it. I feel like it's because you came up with this one, so I'll let Kim Barrett lay it down.
Well, today we were talking about exactly why working more hours is actually ruining your business, because a lot of business owners, they get in there and they think, well, the solution is like I work hard and I make money. So working harder, doing more hours should mean that I get more money. And that's not really the case. And today we want to really kind of share a few stories and then a few strategies for people to get over that and actually step out of that. And, like some of it's probably more raw for me. The burn still hurts when I touch it kind of thing because of the last couple of weeks. But as you said, there's always an occasion where that comes in. But I think, and especially with what you do, Charlie, what you speak about and things like that, it's very easy for people to fall into the trap of what they think is the answer to their problem. And most of the time, it's actually sometimes the complete opposite, which is actually the solution to their problem.
Are you telling me that marketing and sales isn't always the problem, Kim? You telling me more leads doesn't fix this?
Well, look, yes, it does. Of course, that's the only answer to the problem: more leads and sales.
Oh, I joke. It's just funny how often that is the perception of things. But absolutely, I think this is a really important topic. And, both of us have experienced this in that wiring coming up of thinking more hours equals more success or more money or more results in any way, shape or form. And I think the first thing you've got to look at when it comes to this topic is just the logical wiring is wrong. So it's like if I want to get fitter or go to the gym and be stronger, it's like, spending more time in the gym can very well get me more results. Or if, there's many areas of life where doing more actually gives us more. And that's what we're perceived to believe in math, 2 + 2 is 4. It works in that way. But when it comes to business, I always look at this. It's like if you want to go from, making 100 grand a year to making 120 grand a year, you could just work a little bit harder and you probably get there. But if you want to go from making 100 grand a year to 500 grand a year, you've got to be doing completely different things. You can't do the same things or, push 5 times the capacity out of yourself to achieve that. And I think that's lost on a lot of people.
Yeah. And it's the old adage of, like what got you here won't get you there. So there's always something new to learn. It's like, cool. Yes. As you said, like probably up to maybe even 200, 250 grand a year, working hard will like give you that little incremental push. But then it's very hard for you to change your thinking and go, okay, now I need to focus on leverage. Now I need to focus on like only doing money generating activities. And, I'll share a story. And it's happened to me several times because I didn't learn the lesson properly, where it's like I always fall back into, if something happens, you fall back into the characteristics of doing whatever it was originally, which was working hard, doing all the jobs, because you feel like there's a break in the business and you go, well, I need to jump back in and do that. And this happened to me probably 2 to 3 times over probably 5 years, where I haven't adequately set myself up for leverage, and I wasn't actually being I hadn't actually led people properly. And it's like I was like leading or delegating, but I was just telling people what to do. It's like, yeah, cool, do this, but not really giving them any framework around it, why, getting them to think about it or anything like that. It's like, hey, go do it. So then if they disappear, they stop, something happens, or I'm unavailable, shit starts to hit the fan, because in reality, like, they don't actually know why. They've just been told what to do. And they'll come in and ask me things, and it's like, well, then I'm like, well, cool, I need to get better results, so I need to work more. So I'm just going to take that work back. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do the sales, and I'm going to do the management. I'm just going to do everything, and that's going to help us get to like $1 million. And every time it's like it will push you a little bit. It's like pushing literally like a 1-ton truck up a hill. You might get a little move, and then you're like, oh crap, like this is going to drop on me now, and it literally starts falling backwards, and you're like, oh, you can either let go or jump out the way and watch it smash into a hill, or you can go, hey, maybe I need to call some of my strong friends like Charlie and get them to help me push the truck a little bit more.
Absolutely. I love what you just said in many ways there, and agree with a lot of it. It's that habit. It's like when things get hard, it's like we go back to what we feel is safe and what got us results in the past, but then that turns out to be the exact thing that stops us from getting where we need to be. And mastering this stuff and like understanding this topic in depth, in my opinion, I will say this is an opinion thing here, but this is what it takes to push past 7 figures. I think that when you understand this stuff properly and understand that the success of your business isn't tied to the amount of time you put in, that's when you get to hit true scale. That's when the fun starts.
Yeah, and I think it is like there's like, for example, I use a planner, and literally I'm just looking at it now, a couple of the biggest things, and there's anyone that teaches kind of like the time management stuff or delegation and whatnot, they always look at like delegation, deferring, or deleting. And I never really got that. I would still do it. And like, I remember when I've had this planner a few times now, and I'll get it, and I would never like, it would just be like done, 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 done. There was no like circles for the delegation or literally just deleting things. It was like every time it would come on my list, it's like, it's got to be done. As opposed to now, it's like probably half of my list is delegated, and I'm deleting much more things, because like one of the quotes I love is like opportunities are like buses, a new one comes every 15 minutes. It's like, oh no, but the opportunities that I have to do it. Like there was a possibility the other day for this joint venture, and it came up, and I was looking at it, and then I was like, actually, like I'm looking at it on my plate. It was on my plate for 3 days in a row, and that's kind of my, like, if it's there for 3 days, it's like it's something, it has to radically happen with it. And I was like, cool, I'm just deleting it. I'm just crossing that off. It's gone. Messaged the person back, said, cool, no go. And then it's like, oh, so much more like stress gone, and like alleviation gone. It's so much more relaxing.
I feel like there's a powerful lesson even in that, though, the power you've like created in saying no to things.
Mm.
It's a really interesting point that comes with that, because like you could have said yes and again put massive amount of workload on yourself, but then it comes back to what we're talking about now, is that it would have created massive hours of your time. Not having the resources to have that done without you or have it done by someone else in your team puts it all on you. And that's very commonly how entrepreneurs end up burnt out. I think it's a very common story.
Yeah, and then as well, probably not delegating. It's like identifying and not keeping track of the things that I do. And we'll talk about that. I would talk about an idea on that once we get to some of like the strategies of overcoming it. But like just doing everything. And so looking at it's like, why am I like, that's not the best use of my time, like, oh, what's the highest and best use of your time? Is like, it was definitely not doing anything like that. But I'm sure, Charlie, you've probably got, as you said, a myriad of stories of different times where that's happened to you. But give us a little bit of insight into the not obviously the masterful automated businessman we see now, but back in the day.
Well, so first off, I want to start this off is like, I always recognize this in everyone, like our best skills normally come from our biggest pain. So I actually expect, and I don't know the answer to this, but it's like why you're so good at marketing is probably because someone burnt you at marketing. Or there's some story where it's like you didn't have that resource, or people that are good at sales are normally because they weren't able to sell. Like there's always a correlation between where our strength comes from and where our, in the past, our challenges come from. It's like the irony of, most comedians have had sad instances in their life. There's a lot of these ones that look at. Most teachers, if you look hard enough, felt like they didn't get taught well. And that's why they became a teacher, to change it. But the point I make on this one is like, if you look at the way my businesses are set up now, where my values are at, you've got to acknowledge how badly I fucked this up before, to the point of why it's made it such a priority for me now. So I'll dig into this a little bit, because I didn't wake up knowing this stuff, and I certainly didn't accidentally stumble into it. It's like it came from a massive amount of pain and frustration. So the one I talk about the most, and the one that I would really love to articulate, is when I had a marketing agency. I had a company called PPC Empire that was my business and everything like that. And I honestly, I reckon I could have given Gary Vee a run for his money in hours worked. I really was working astronomical hours every day, to the point where I wasn't doing anything else. And I was very fortunate. My lovely wifey, Bianca, helped me a lot in those times, because like she was pretty much feeding me so I could keep working, and then all the rest. But this is where things get really, really interesting, is that working that many hours and doing that many things actually created the destruction of the business in many ways. So when I look at it and what happened from there, the overworking of hours and working in that type of behavior created a very unbalanced life, where my relationship wasn't strong. Like Bianca and me were like, I suppose even framing it up as, we're doing the hard yards or sacrificing for the later years. But it wasn't a good relationship. Like I barely spent any time with her, and like completely my fault. The other side of that is I wasn't seeing any of my friends. Like I actually, and I regret this to this day, I missed a friend's wedding to work. And that still haunts me, because that's a relationship I value. The other side of things is that I wasn't looking after my health. And there's a photo that people have seen floating around on the internet where I was about 120 kilos, because my health was deteriorating, all at the expense of working so many hours in this business. Now, what's interesting is this is a really common story. I'm certainly not the person, how can I put this? I'm not alone in doing this, and I'm not the only one. And there's probably people out there who are now. But working this many hours and treating my life like this to pay off for someday, because that was my thoughts, do more to make more as well, do more to have more success more quickly, caused the destruction. And why did it cause that destruction? Is because in operating a business in that way, where it's all on me, and then getting to that point where I was burnt out, eventually I started hating that business. And not only that, is when you are that into a business, working that often, your thinking isn't clear. You've got no perspective and outlook. So I was making bad decisions from being burnt out as well. And eventually this just built up to a point where I ultimately didn't want to be a part of that business anymore, and ended up moving it on. So sold some things off, shut down some things, and send off some systems and rolled some things into new businesses. It was a really interesting point in my life where I almost said, well, look, I've got to start again. Now, overworking was the core function of that. And I look at it because, Kim, you had an agency at the same time I did. Like, we're kind of starting at about the same point. And it's like I look at how well you've handled that journey compared to how well I've handled that journey. And overworking is where it kind of looks at one of those key things. I wanted the success so bad, I went all in, but ultimately it caused my destruction. And then on the reverse of that, we can look at that now as like, Outsourcing Angels is a business that's highly leveraged. I don't have to be there any day. It's completely optional how often I work, but I was able to create that only through the pain on the other side. So that was the worst experience I've had with doing too many hours, and it really actually destroyed the business in reality. Like, that was one of the fundamental things that led to its demise. What I know now, though, I really think I could have done things differently and worked it a lot better had I been smarter and done things differently. But again, I really can't complain. My life is pretty awesome now, and that experience certainly shaped a lot of it. So that would be my kind of story of overworking.
Yeah, and I think there's so many like good points in there and important points. And one of the things I find, and I'm guessing you would have some similar, is that when you are doing everything, you're actually not doing that much, but you seem to be able to squeeze it into a lot more hours. Like when you break it down, and if you were to task that out to people and they did it on an hourly basis, an hourly rate, they would probably, even though it wouldn't be as good as you, one of those old adages that business owners will say, like, oh, they don't do it as good as me. But which is bullshit anyway, but like you get it. But then it's like, cool, but because you're doing the sales, you're doing the follow-up, you're doing the front-end marketing, you're doing the delivery, you're doing all this stuff, you're actually doing all of it at like 75% or 60%, when someone else would step in.
60%, dude. Easy 60%. I'll acknowledge right now, because that is such a good point, is I look back on that and say I wasn't efficient at all. I was busy, I was motivated, I was working hard, but the outputs were not efficient at all.
Yeah, and it's like I notice, and I know I have days, and it's like, well, I look at it, I'm like, I have such a busy day, and the little things that I have to get done because I have to, because I have calls, meetings. I go to I always lock away our family dinner night, I do that, and it has to be done by that time. And then the days when I don't have like back-to-back meetings and calls, it's like the same to-do list takes me like 10 hours because I'm still trying to do everything. I was like, hang on, this is not making sense. It's like spread it out. And then it's like, oh, randomly, I'll do this thing as well and take it on, as opposed to going, because I think it is, especially as you start to, like, if we start to look at maybe coming out the other side, right, and identifying things, you start to feel a bit guilty being like, oh, I'm a business owner and I'm in this business and there's other people working. I have to be busy because that's what I'm meant to be, right? If I'm not busy, then I'm not being productive. I'm not being successful or anything like that, as opposed to going, well, actually, the less busy I get, the more space I get to think, the more productive I can actually be. So it's kind of like a flip, that's why it is like what got you there will get you to the next level. And I think it's something that you shared with me and a few other things where I started to actually audit how much time I spent on stuff using a plugin. I think we talked about it before as well, Rescue Time, and I've had it for so long. And I remember I had it before. I had it for a year and I never looked at the reports. I would get them every week and I would be like, cool. And it would be like XYZ amount of time, great. And then just delete it. And I think it was the start of this year, maybe late last year, and we're talking about like optimizing and actually pulling it out. And I was like, oh, damn. I was like, so much of my time I wasn't tracking properly and giving me like actually good insights of what areas I need help in and stuff like that. I started using it. I was like, man, this is so much more effective. Like, it's so when you actually use the tool, and it's like, but I think it's good to almost to have it, because then I was able to go back and I was like, cool, on all of those weeks and months where I wasn't thinking about that I'm tracking my time and how it's going to reflect in the outcome, what was I actually doing? And breaking it down. And it's like, oh, like there's actually all these holes. Oh, there's all this stuff I was doing that I shouldn't be doing, that I could very easily have an assistant trained up, another team member trained up to do and take over those things. But because I think when you, like, if you do it from now, you're like, I'm going to be super good with my time and track it. It's like, no, because you're just going to bullshit yourself and be like, oh, yes, everything's so productive and I'm so good. It's like, well, no, show the realness and then you can see what you need to identify.
So you said something I think really interesting there as well, is the crucial mindset we must overcome when going from a solo or an operator in a business to being a business owner is the being okay with not having a loaded plate and being very, very concerned with business outputs instead of your individual outputs. So it's like, for me, when I look back on this time, and this is really, really interesting, it's kind of when I was obsessed with what I was doing and what I was producing, I wasn't concentrating properly on what the business was producing. And it's like when I shifted to make sure that when I'm measuring things, I'm not, I am measuring how much time I'm spending on things, don't get me wrong, but becoming more concerned with what the business is able to create while I'm not doing anything. And when that becomes the obsession of going, well, when I'm doing nothing, things are being done and this is how much, and that's what I try and create more of, that's leverage, that's skill. But when I was in PPC Empire, and like we go back to that story from there, is that like I had staff. I wasn't a solo operator. Like I had a full team, but I still wasn't operating it in that way. And I think part of the reason was I was so burnt out being in it and concerned with those types of things. And that safety we spoke about before, going back to what got me to here, it was really was stopping me from being a good business owner. Not to mention, I'll mention a follow-on from here, and I look at this, is like when I was burnt out in this company, I think I was actually a really poor leader as well. And it's like I was actually, I don't want to say a tyrant or a dictator, but I certainly wasn't the best boss. And I certainly look at what the culture I created in rocking up to work burnt out every day, and like how my attitude and like how buggy I was and things like that. Because you get tweaked after working 70 hours for a year straight, 70 hours a week for a year straight. And I look back at that and I go, I would have handled it so much better if I was well rested and had a more balanced life. So a lot of regret on that I look through, but very interesting.
Yeah, it's there's so many good points in all the stuff that you said there, and as you said, being able to be an effective leader, not a just like a manager, or as well, and not even a dictator in the saying of like you're evil in the way you communicate. But some people, it's like, cool, just do this, and that's not really leadership or management. You're dictating what people have to do, and then like it doesn't allow them to have the growth and understanding of actually why they're doing it. And then when you look for their help in the future, it's like, well, don't know. You're the boss. You tell me. You're the one that told me what just to do it. I don't know why to do it.
Ooh, so I want to elaborate a little bit more on that. Okay, so like how I was operating in this business is like, this looks at mindset as I was so busy doing my own things that I was just being transactional with my staff. Or like, as you said, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, but then I'll go back over here and be busy with what I'm doing. And it's almost like hurricane leadership. I'm just in and out like a hurricane. Where we look at from there, it's like, but in the other mindset of thinking and how I operate today is that because there isn't any outputs on my plate, it's all on the business's plate. I'm very, very focused on encouraging my people to be able to do the workload and work with them in a much better way. And then being, I suppose, a better leader. And I think the key skill here is becoming much better at creating productive and effective people in your team that carry the load instead of you carrying the load. So the business is carrying that. So
yeah, 100%. And now, if you were to look back, and let's just say, because obviously you made a big shift in what you were doing, but for all the listeners, like what was like, let's just say that they got like they're not up to that point that you got to in PPC Empire, but they get this. There's going. Some of this is ringing a few bells. Like looking back now, retrospectively, what's like one or two things that you would immediately identify and work on that then they can probably take and have a look at.
Yeah, I think this is a really good one. So number one is you got to start tracking your time. You really do. And there's a couple of ways to do it, whether it's on your calendar and you just put in what you spent your time on, or using a fantastic tool like Rescue Time, is be real with yourself with what type of time you're putting in. Number two is like, let's say you are doing that, and this is such an interesting thing to consider. At the point when I started, I really struggled to understand this in the beginning, which is ironically funny now. But as a business owner, you must understand the difference between business owner tasks and business operator tasks or technician tasks. And when you're looking at your time, you have to be spending time on business owner tasks, not business operator tasks. So if you're getting in the trenches and, in my example is like getting into AdWords accounts, doing things like that, and that's consuming most of your time, you have to understand that that's limiting. But when we look at like an example of a really good business owner task is like hiring someone or putting in something that creates leverage. It's like they're the tasks you really got to start spending more time on. So we go through that time evaluation from there, and then we start to understand what business owner tasks are and what not business owner tasks are, and then start setting a business up so that you are a business owner and can be away from it, or it can be separate, rather from building something that you're so ingrained in. And then thirdly, and this is where I just think I agree on this in so much point, is hang around people that have this in place and pay attention to what they're doing and operating from, because it can be, I recognize this from speaking to quite a few people in like our network and other ones we spoke to from there. It's like, hang on a second, these guys are wildly successful and they're not focused on doing the work at all. They're focused on hiring the people. Ooh, they're focusing on what strategies to roll down and the reporting. And I'm like, well, I'm not paying attention to any of that stuff. And that was kind of like my starting investigation of how I should be spending my time.
Yeah, that's so true, and it's such an important thing to look at. And I think definitely being around the people, because as you say, like especially when, and that's the the power of a group. Cheeky plug for the association, like being around other like-minded people, because if you're around people who are at the same level that are hitting the same problems, like yes, sometimes you can brainstorm, but none of you know the answer. Like you don't know the actual solution to the problem. You can all postulate and guess, but that's why as well they say sometimes success is actually the worst teacher. Because one of you does something, it's like, oh, I just started doing YouTube ads and now I've got way more money in my business. Oh, so we should all do that then. It's like, well, no, like you're going to hit the same problem shortly, but unless you've found that person or the group of people that you can surround yourself with to go, well, actually, yes, I had the same problem and it's going to be slower, but do this instead to then allow you to basically leapfrog. Like that's going to be the best answer for you. Because I think it's very hard when you're surrounded by people, and even if you are in groups of similar people, you need to find people that have achieved that goal. It's like, cool, if you don't want to work, like if you want to work 70 hours a week, cool, hang out with people that do that if that's all you want to do. But if you want to be able to give yourself the freedom, the possibilities of growing your business, leveraging it, stepping out, scaling big level, you need to be around different people. So I think it's so important. We joke in the association. There was a picture of someone talking about how like they work, I don't know what it was, 16 hours a day or something. And Charlie's like, if any of you do that, you're out of the association. Like, it's like jokingly, but you know what I mean? It's like, well, you shouldn't, like, cool, yes, sometimes you have to work hard, but it shouldn't be your goal to work 16 hours a day. It's, again, unless it's something that if you absolutely love and you want to do that, like, all means, do that. But it shouldn't be like by choice, right? Like, not by force, that you have to do that each and every day, each and every month, each and every year to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, no cheeky plug, I'll give direct plug, is like, this is exactly what we stand for in the association, which is our community, and people who value this type of thing should come and be a part of the association so they can hang around more people that see life this way, because it's vitally important to hang around more people that have a look like that. But coming back to your point there, and I really do think this is very, very interesting. So like, if you want to work 16 hours a day and it's a choice, go for it. Completely cool if you want to. But when you have to, that's a real concern. And I would, this is something I looked at really distinctly here. It's like, and I'm going to say I am, if you have to work more than 8 hours a day for your business to be successful, you are focusing on the wrong things. You are not paying attention to what needs to be done for your business to actually be successful. I would highly encourage you evaluate how you're going about things.
Yeah. And there's one thing I'll leave people with as well is, like, again, if you're enjoying things and you're doing it, that's great. But you do have to, like, remember that there's so much more to life apart from our work and our jobs and stuff, like, which we can get kind of caught up in. And it was like, I remember hearing Daryl Urbanski. I did a podcast with him a while ago, and he was telling me a story. There was basically a guy who was, two guys started a company, was very successful. They worked really hard. One of them had a family. The other was a single guy. They both put in equally as much hours. They were successful, and then they sold the business, and they were about 45, 50 years old. And then afterwards, basically they decided, cool, we got our paychecks. Basically, we sold our companies. We're both going to go on separate holidays. We'll catch up with each other when we're back and, see how each other are going. The guy went away with his family. All good. The other guy was in a hotel in Costa Rica, let's just say. And the guy got a call a few days later saying, hey, your business partner, well, I'm just letting you know that he actually just committed suicide, because the only thing he had in his life was his business. Took that away from him. He had nothing else. He's like, well, what's the point? What's the point of life? Like, what else is there if I don't, like, if I just have my business, like, what else is there? And it's gone. We sold it now. My buddy's gone off and he's with his family, and he's going to be hanging out with them. Like, what do I do? So it's like it's a harsh point to share, but it's just something, again, to take into consideration, that you can't go, as you said, like, it's not the delayed gratification. When I get to here, then I'll have a family and I'll do this and do that. It's like, you've got to have aspects of that come in all the time.
So true. So, and it's like, it's a very sad point and a far too common of a story, in all honesty. And I really do think it's lost on entrepreneurs these days to have a hobby. Like, when I got the leverage in my life, like, full disclosure is, like, I've got a very great lifestyle at the moment where I've got the time and freedom of choice thanks to all these things and setting things up properly. But it's like, I found that when I started on this, it's like I almost felt guilty for having other hobbies, because I thought I should be working or learning skills for the business or networking for the business. Like, it became hard to just do a hobby just for the sake of having a hobby. And that was something that I really had to overcome. And it's like, now it's like, I love cooking. There's no other reason than I love it, and it has no benefit to the business in any way, but just enjoying the activity or doing other things for the sake of it has become something very beautiful in my life, and I'm very appreciative of.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's why you need to have, like, give yourself the space to do those things, whether it's like, and even if it's not a hobby, but just spending time with family, friends, partner, whatever it is, and, like, actually, carving that space out and giving yourself that time to do that as well.
So my intention for the rest of my life is to live like I'm semi-retired. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah.
Because
you're not far away, I reckon.
Not at all. Yeah, well, look, I think it's a better way of living. I mean, each to their own. If people want to work more, that's completely fine. But to me, it's like, I like a little bit of stimulation and excitement, but I also like doing other things. Like I love riding my bike. I love getting to hang out with people like you or do things like this podcast. This podcast isn't a financial endeavor. And if it was, it'd be the worst one ever for the time invested. So it's like, this is something we do because we enjoy doing it and because we love sharing and talking to other people. If it was just about money or, we could go do that somewhere else. So that's what I really stand for and believe in these days. But I want to flip this around now, Kim. I want to hear about an experience from your side of things then. So have you got an experience of working too many hours and how it kind of destroyed things?
All the time. Yeah, just this morning. No, so I mean, the biggest one for me was when I took on a huge project. Like, I think I've told this story many times. I can't remember if I've told it on here 2 Christmases ago, where I was just taking on whatever project. It's like, cool. Doesn't matter if I can, like if I have the team support for them or not. And I got like my biggest contract ever come through. And like just the amount of time, this was like leading up to Christmas. I think I closed the deal in like November, and they were like a big ASX listed e-commerce company. And it was just like the stress and pressure. I remember it's like when I get stressful, it's like, I don't know what it is, if it's something, but I know like my hands get like almost like stress marks under them, and it's just like my hands feel weird, and I can tell if I'm getting stressed. It's almost like there's, not to be graphic or weird, but it's almost like there's something like that pops up like a welt under the skin and just gets sore. And I had my hands and I was like, what the hell is going on? And I was Googling it. It's like stress was like a big proponent of it, because I was like, this is so weird. I was like, I've never had this before. What is it? And like doctors like, I don't know, like it's kind of weird, but don't really know what it is. And I was Googling and I found this thing. I was like, oh, right. And now I still know. It's like, if there's ever a time where I have stress or anything, it's like I feel like in my hands, I'm like, cool. Right now it's like, they're all right. So it's not too bad. We're okay. But it happened just before Christmas and I was freaking out. And then I was like, oh, and I was like, I spoke to one of our mentors and told him the situation. I was like, I'm going to be working the whole of Christmas. And it was like my original story of why I started business is like, I don't want anyone to tell me if I can or can't spend Christmas with my family. It was like one of the big things for me. And I was like, I'm going to work the whole of Christmas. I'm going to be working the whole of New Year's. And it's like, this is going to be terrible. And he's like, why don't you just fire them? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you don't have to work for them, right? I'm like, what? And he's like, well, you took them as much as they took you, right? So you can, like, why don't you just fire them? And it took me like a day. And then I was like, had knots in my stomach. I was just feeling sick. And then I was like, but I didn't want to, like, the reason for the knots as well was like, I didn't want to fire them and leave them in the lurch. It was Christmas time, their biggest time of year, blah, blah, blah. So I made friends with another marketer who's like one of the biggest e-commerce marketers, and I had him on Facebook and I showed him a message and I was like, oh, hey, like I have a client who's in e-commerce, like I just can't deal with them. Like it's just too much. Like I'm going to die if I do this. Can I send them to you? And they must get a lot of messages like this. And they're like, oh, well, we only work with clients who are doing whatever it was, like lots of money, like XYZ a month. I was like, cool. Yeah, they do about 2 times that. And he's like, oh, well, let's jump on a call right now. And it's like,
rise to the occasion.
People are like, oh, they're doing $5,000 a month. I was like, no, he's like a big client. And he's like, cool. Like, this is the person that does all our big stuff. Like, connect them up. I messaged them. I was like, guys, like, I've got to let you go. And they even asked me, like, why? They're like, the question they asked was like, why should we let us go? And I was like, what? I was like, that's not even a question. They're like, but we've invested time with you, obviously teaching you about our stuff. And I was like, look, I'll give everything I can to these guys, but they're like, number one, they're just outright better than me. Like they're better than me at e-commerce for sure. But as well, they're going to be able to help you scale. Like if we hit scale, like I'm going to literally die. And then, if I walk under a bus, you're going to if I get hit by a bus, you're in trouble, right? So I'll like manage the transition. I'll give everything over to them. I have break down whatever I can, do calls with them, but you're fired. Basically, it's like, well, no, you're fired, but I want to hand you over. And then after that, I was like, I can never, ever, ever let that happen again. I was like, that was just the most stressful experience just before Christmas. Like we finished the whole handover. I think it was like 22nd. And I was just like, able to actually breathe and actually have a good Christmas. But it was so stressful by taking on all that extra work, doing that extra hours. And I was like, I can't, like, it was literally, I was like, I hit the limit. I was like, literally can't do this. And then they're like, and next year we want to double. I'm like, oh crap. like, no, that's not possible for me, like, so I literally had to get rid of it. And then I think it was like probably the following February, I was like, Charlie, I need stuff to do big stuff. Like, that's probably my exact words. And he's like, oh, let's look at what systems. I was like, you mean like my pen and paper? Like, what do you mean by these like systems that you talk about? And he's like, oh, okay, we got some work to do, Kim. So that was kind of like.
Do you know what's funny is I actually remember that. I remember
Yeah.
that time very distinctly, and how it was interesting because you were clearly feeling the pressure as you're describing from here. And it's like, as a business owner, we want to perform for our clients or in every way, shape or form. And there's so many layers that come to this, but ultimately what's great to recognize here is like this was creating a huge amount of burnout for you and extreme hours in Christmas time, which is huge. And it's funny. Well, it's not actually funny. It's very serious. We'll go through from there. But being geared up for the right clients and taking on the right type of clients can hugely affect how many hours you're working or how you're working and things like that. I think it was a very good decision to move on from them and then resetting to be able to work towards that or working with more of the ideal client.
Yeah, and as well, it was because I didn't have the ability to delegate and stuff, and I think I hired a virtual assistant from you guys at the same time, and I was doing all this stuff, and it's like I was just like literally just tasking, like just chucking like stuff at them in Messenger, like no project management, nothing, and I was like, this is ridiculous, and literally I was like, no, I just gotta get rid of it so I can actually relax and have a good Christmas and sort everything out. And I was like, cool. Then now I know I need to be able to create leverage. I know I need to be able to have a system around how I do that. I know that I need to be able to delegate and actually like lead people properly. Because like if I keep doing this, literally it would have been the same as you. It's like, cool. Like, and don't get me wrong, we did a good job for them. Like we did good for what they paid and they were happy still, but it's like it wasn't best serving them or us. And I was like, I could have very easily had it to the point where it was just overwhelming for us, and then that dropped off. But I was like, I'm just gonna nip that in the bud and tie it off there, and then just keep plugging along for where we're at.
Yeah, good decision. So I want to ask, I suppose, because we've both experienced this, and like I can tell in reliving these, we're sitting here going, oh shit, I've forgotten how bad that was. That was actually a really hard time for both of us. And I'm sure there's people out there that are in the same boat or have these things come up and they're like, whoa. But I almost want to ask a different question now of going, well, on the other side of things, now that you have more time and you look after yourself better, where are the benefits? Like, where are the outways of things? And I'll start with an example. I've noticed for myself is that when I'm working less hours, that I have better ideas. Like I'm more creative and I actually produce my best ideas, in fact, normally come to me when I'm out riding. So I've come to the decision that if I'm not putting the hours in on the bike, that I'm probably not going to have the best thinking, so a direct output for me in making sure I'm not working too many more hours is that my thinking is so much clearer and the creative outputs are 10 times better than when I'm working 70 hours a week. So do you have any examples like that?
Yeah, it would be that's definitely one for me as well. Like the brain space, like I always say, it's like there's only so much space in my head and it's very hard to squeeze other things in or come up with something new and creative. And you just get stuck in the hamster wheel cycle of doing things over and over again and keep going. And you haven't done a review on your business for a year. You haven't looked at anything. You haven't led anything. And especially with our team, it's like I very much want to instill and lead them in a much better way at the moment. So I know that when I get stuck down, and you said it before, it's like I can't lead someone if I'm spending all my time doing the work. I can't instill leadership. I can't look at their processes, help them more. Like it's impossible. But as well, it's like when I'm working that much, I definitely know that I don't, and this is kind of an interesting loop, right? When I'm working hard, I don't make time for my health. And it means that I give a less output. And when I do go to and look after my health, I have better ideas and get a better output, right? But it's like, I have to work so much, so I can't focus on my health. But my health would actually help me work better and give me better outcomes. It's like, well,
that's where that balance comes back into it. So that's another really common one. I look at back and when I wasn't looking after my health and not sleeping enough hours, it's the same thing. It's like I wasn't performing as well. And I think team is a really big one as well. It's like if you're burnt out, you're rubbing that off on the team. But when you're fresh and inspired, you're rubbing that off on the team. And like I definitely notice a difference in how my team performs when I'm in the right zone, when I'm in that really good place for myself. It's infectious. Like we've both experienced it. Like, I mean, at the extreme level, if you've ever been around someone who has had a loved one pass away, is like their sadness is infectious. And on the same thing, if you've ever been around someone who's just had a really great day and something awesome's happened, their happiness is infectious. So it's like for me, I don't want to be that burnt out business owner or someone working crazy amount of hours because I know it's going to have an effect on the output of the team.
Yeah, and it's like I've even noticed sometimes, like if I'm having a bad day, it's like sometimes I'll just because we work in an office together, like I'll just go home. It's like there's no like if I bring the team down, the same as I notice someone else, I'm like, guys, like cool, like have the afternoon off, all good. You got nothing like pressing on your plate, head home. And it's like, and afterwards they're like, how come you do that? I'm like, well, do you notice how much lower your energy is and how everyone else kind of like catch the blues? Versus when you come in high energy. So it's like I always try to come in high energy to the office to make sure everyone's rocking and rolling. But if I don't, it's like, cool. I'm like, guys, I've got meetings the rest of the arvo. See you later. And I'll just go home. And I'll still do some work, but at least I'm not like bringing down the energy of what's possible for them, so they still have a rest of the great day.
Yeah, I really love that as well. I'm very encouraging on my guys on the same things because we both obviously recognize that as well. I mean, sometimes you just if you're having a particularly bad day, you just got to give it a little bit of space. Working aggressively in that moment is not the answer.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, it's such a bad day. Better work harder. It's like, no.
So for you then, when we look at these, I mean, you've already got a few signs when this is coming through, like the, I don't even know what to call it, the stress we'll name it, or that general feeling of overworkedness. Like, how do you overcome that, or how do you look to avoid those situations happening?
Well, now it's, it's really looking at that kind of like delegating, deferring, or deleting sort of thing and going, okay, cool. If I have all this coming on, like, what am I going to do about it? Is it something I can just get rid of? Like, is it something that I can go, hey, cool, like next month, like, and just push it out? Or is it something where I can go, hey, like, I need someone else to do it. I bring someone else in, hire a contract or whatever it may be to kind of alleviate that, as opposed to going, oh, cool, like, what do I do about it? It's more, and we've got a more of a process now as well with the team where it's like, cool, collectively, this is happening. Like, what do we do about it? And, not me, it's not coming, ideas don't come from me. I'm like, cool, we want to achieve this, or this has happened or popped up. No silly answers. Like, every answer is a viable option. Like, what do you guys think? And like, we have our full team, we have our like virtual assistants on the call. We have everyone, they give some really good ideas, by the way. Like, they pop up and this is like, cool, everyone, we want an idea from you today and every day for the next 5 days. Don't care what the answer, like what it is, but you have to have a new idea. And literally we have like 20 ideas up on our board just outside my window, and we bring them in each week and we work through them. As opposed to before, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, what can I do right this second to solve this problem? It's like, cool, how collectively do we work together to solve this problem and move things forward? As opposed to going, oh, it's just me. And then going, cool, now that we've identified that, who's responsible for that? Who's doing what? What's our deadlines? And let's move it forward. So it just makes so much of a difference when it's like, cool, collectively, what are we all going to do about this? Because it's something we all want to solve versus going, I got to do this now because of this.
I love what you said right there about making it a team issue instead of making it your issue. I think there's tremendous power in team building right there. And in that transitionary step from going from a business operator or a solo operator or someone that works in their business into going into a business owner, like that is the mindset. So like, I dig it, Kim. I love it. I'm even probably going to steal it, in all honesty. It's very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was something that popped up recently. I was like, okay, like, if I have to solve every single problem that comes in, it's going to be impossible. And if I have to do everything for every solution, it just can't work. So just bring it to the table. And like I said, we've got like 2 virtual assistants, our sales guys, everyone comes in, even if it's not something necessarily for their area. Generally, it's like people who it's outside of their area or their division that they work in. They're like, oh, what about this? And you're like, damn, like, sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees, and they give you that. You're like, cool, done. Let's do that. Who's doing that? Sweet, do it. Like, it's just great.
Yeah. So I want to recap here because there's a few things that I think need to be, for anyone that's made it through to this part of the episode, I want to make sure there's a value-packed way for them to know how to deal with this in future. So I'm going to go through some common things and you can say yes or no based on this. But it's like, step 1 is awareness in my mind from both sides. It's like whether it's in Kim's case that he notices physical things on his body where it's like, well, okay, I'm doing too much. I'm feeling burnt out. I can see I'm stressed. I can see these things are coming on. From my side of things, I very much like to track my hours. So I know if I'm working more than, let's say, 40 hours in a week, which even that I think is a bit much. But if I'm working that many hours or I'm working consecutive 50-hour weeks, I know I'm burnt out. It's not even how I feel like I am. So being open to both of those things. And as people, we're inherently bad at recognizing that we're burnt out. We just like to say, I'm fine and push through. But I promise you, you're not working optimally at all if you're pushing through hours at that. Step 2 is you've got to create a way of identifying how things should be different. I really feel like that's the next part here. So whether that's working out what business owner tasks are that are going to create you leverage, or whether that's moving things or delegating things to your team, you have to start moving things around or thinking differently about how you can shuffle to get your hours down for the same outputs. And I think that's a really important part. And then the next part, and it's in both cases here in your story and in mine, is having other people. It really comes back to looking at how other people are running these business models and having success in those levels above so that you can model some of the behaviors and actions to what they're focusing on so that you don't end up one of those people that, is continually working 80 hours a week to have the success. So that's my 1, 2, 3 based on both of our stories from here. How do you feel about that? Yes, no?
Yeah, 2 thumbs up on that, I'm pretty sure. I think anyone listening would, be in a very good position taking all that into consideration.
Yeah, so that's what I would look at. I really think that's an effective way. And I will mention the association here. If you're someone that is looking for more people to hang out with are thinking this way and more people that are looking to be those true business owners, then the association is the place you should be coming to hang out with people like myself and Kim, because this is the stuff we focus on and are incredibly passionate about creating leverage on that form. So I'll make sure there is a link to see more information about the association or a way of coming and being a part of that in some way, shape or form. So guys, we're going to wrap it up for this episode on here, but really enjoyed this conversation, Kim. It's interesting that it's brought up a bit of emotion. It's brought up some horror stories from the past, but nonetheless, I'm hoping other people can avoid it. So is there anything you would like to share before we wrap this one up?
No, just make sure reach out before it becomes a problem. Find people before it becomes a nightmare for you. That's the only little tidbit I'll give you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say to everyone out there that's been working hard, make an effort to change it. The someday analogy just doesn't work out. So it's your chance to move things on now. So that's it, guys. Thank you for listening to this episode of Confessions of a Business Owner with myself and Kim Barrett.